lanterns are turned low tonight, and the fire has settled into a friendly, patient glow. The wind has grown quiet outside, as if it too were settling in for the evening, and the only sounds now are the soft crackle of the hearth and the distant murmur of the brook that runs behind the tavern, its voice as familiar and comforting as an old lullaby. If you are comfortable, I will tell you about a druid who keeps a little sanctuary at the forest's edge, where even the most mysterious beasts are met with warm water, gentle hands, and soft words. Listen like you are listening to leaves. Come, settle closer to the warmth. The story is soft, and it will carry you gently where you need to go. There is a cottage at the edge of the Whispering Wood, in a place where the meadow grasses grow tall and silver in the moonlight, and the trees lean close like old friends sharing secrets. It is not a large cottage, nor a grand one, just a single room with a sleeping loft above and a wide stone hearth below. Built from river stones, worn smooth by centuries of water, and fitted together with the patient care of someone who understood that a home should be made slowly, thoughtfully, with love woven into every joint and corner. The cottage has no proper name, though the creatures of the forest have their own ways of speaking about it. In the rustle of wings, in the soft press of paws upon the path, in the low hum that certain beasts make when they are content and seeking comfort. They know this place the way all wild things know the places that are safe, by instinct, by memory, by the deep, wordless knowledge that passes from mother to cub, from flock to fledgling, from one generation of forest dwellers to the next. And they know the one who lives there, the caretaker, the tender of wounds and soother of fears, the druid who has made it her life's work to welcome whatever wandering creature finds its way to her door. Her name is Mira, though she has been called many things over the years, moss-hand by the creatures who remember how her fingers feel upon their fur, lantern keeper by those who have followed her soft golden light through the darkness to safety, hum singer by the beasts who have fallen asleep to the sound of her voice. She answers to all of these names, and to none of them, because names are only sounds after all, and what matters is not what one is called, but what one does, how one moves through the world, what one offers to those in need. Mira has offered much over the years, not great deeds or heroic rescues, nothing so dramatic as that, but small kindnesses repeated endlessly until they have become as natural to her as breathing. A bowl of warm water for a creature with aching joints, a salve of herbs for a wound that has begun to heal but still needs tending, a soft word spoken into a frightened ear, a gentle hand laid upon a trembling flank, a blanket spread in a corner of the cottage where something tired can curl up and rest without fear. Tonight, as on most nights, is a tending night, not a night of crisis or urgency. Those are rare, and when they come, Mira meets them with the same quiet steadiness she brings to everything. But a night of simple care, of the kind routines that keep the sanctuary running, that keep the creatures healthy and content, that keep Mira herself grounded in the good work she has chosen to do. I have met her, you know, once, many years ago, when I was younger and more prone to wandering. I found myself on the road that passes by the Whispering Wood, and I stopped at her cottage to ask for water. She gave me water, yes, cool and sweet from the spring that bubbles up behind the cottage. But she gave me something more as well. She gave me tea, brewed from herbs that grew wild in her garden. She gave me a chair by her fire, worn smooth by many sittings, shaped by years of welcoming weary travelers. And she gave me stories, told in that soft, unhurried voice of hers, stories of the creatures she had tended and the lessons they had taught her. I have never forgotten that evening. The warmth of the fire, the scent of the herbs, the sound of something large and gentle breathing in the corner of the cottage, a creature I could not quite see in the dimness, but whose presence felt as safe and solid as the stones of the hearth. That is the feeling I want to share with you tonight. That sense of being held, of being cared for, of being in a place where nothing is demanded of you except that you rest, that you let the warmth seep into your bones, that you allow yourself to be tended to, the way Mira tends to her beasts. The fire crackles now in this very hearth, here in my tavern, and I find myself thinking of Mira's hearth, of the way it glows on nights like this one, casting its golden light across the worn wooden floor, across the bundles of dried herbs that hang from the rafters, across the jars and bowls and soft cloths that are the tools of her trade. The cottage is quiet at this hour, but it is not empty. It is full of the small sounds of a home at rest, the tick of cooling stones, the whisper of wind in the thatch, the distant hoot of an owl that has made its nest in the old oak just beyond the garden gate. And beneath those sounds, if you listen closely, you can hear something else, something soft and rhythmic, the breathing of creatures who have found their way home. Mira moves through the cottage now, in my telling, in the soft light of evening. She is not young anymore, but age has settled upon her gently, softening her features rather than sharpening them, turning her hair from brown to grey in a gradual fade that reminds me of the way summer turns to autumn in these parts. Slowly, peacefully, with no sharp edges or sudden changes. Her hands are still strong, still sure, still capable of the 100 small tasks that fill her days, but they move more slowly now than they once did, more deliberately, as if she has learned that hurrying leads only to missed moments and never to better outcomes. She pauses by the window and looks out at the evening. The sun has set, but the sky still holds a memory of its light, a soft glow along the horizon, fading from gold to rose, to the deep blue-gray that comes before true darkness. The first stars are appearing, one by one, like candles being lit in the windows of a distant house. The forest beyond the garden is growing dim, its edges softening, its depths filling with shadow. And somewhere out there, she knows, the creatures are stirring. The beasts of the evening, the ones who sleep through the bright hours and wake when the light grows kind. They will come to her soon, as they always do, drawn by the lantern she will light, by the scent of the herbs she will prepare, by the knowledge that here, in this small cottage at the forest's edge, they will find what they need. Mira takes a slow, deep breath, the kind of breath that makes room in the chest, that settles the shoulders, that tells the body, now we begin. The breath fills her lungs with the scent of home, wood smoke and dried lavender, old wool and fresh bread, the green growing smell that drifts in from the garden no matter the season. Then she turns from the window and begins to prepare. The fire needs tending first. Not much, just a few small pieces of apple wood added to the coals, their bark beginning to char and glow, their fragrance rising to join the other scents of the cottage. Then the water must be warmed, set in the big copper kettle that has hung above this hearth for longer than Mira can remember, its sides blackened by years of flame, but its interior still bright and clean. The herbs must be gathered, not all of them, just the ones she will need tonight, chosen from the bundles overhead with the sure knowledge of long practice. Chamomile for soothing, lavender for calm, comfrey for healing, mint for refresh. Each task flows into the next, unhurried, unforced, a rhythm that Mira has followed for so many years that it has become like breathing, like the beat of her heart. She does not need to think about what comes next. Her hands know, her body knows, and in the knowing there is a kind of peace, a kind of meditation, a kind of prayer that requires no words. The kettle begins to hum, the fire settles into its evening song, and somewhere outside, in the deepening twilight, the first soft footsteps can be heard on the path that leads from the forest to the cottage door. The creatures are coming, and Mira is ready. The lantern that hung beside Mira's door was no ordinary lantern, though it looked common enough. A simple frame of blackened iron, a pane of glass on each of its four sides, a hook at the top for hanging. What made it special was not its construction, but its contents. A soft bed of moss that glowed with its own gentle light, a pale green-gold luminescence that asked nothing of flame or oil, but simply was, simply shone, steady and warm and welcoming. Lantern moss, some called it. Others called it fairy glow or star breath, or the light that remembers. Mira had found the first clump of it growing deep in the whispering wood many years ago, in a hollow where the moonlight fell through a gap in the canopy and seemed to gather on the forest floor like water in a basin. She had taken only a small piece, never more than the moss could spare, and she had planted it in this lantern, and it had grown there, slowly and steadily, until now it filled the frame with a light that never flickered, never faded, never failed. She lit no other lamp on tending nights. The lantern moss was enough to guide the creatures through the twilight, enough to illuminate the path from garden gate to cottage door, enough to tell every wandering beast that here was sanctuary, here was rest, here was a place where the darkness held no threat. The light fell now upon the first visitor of the evening. It was a creature unlike any you might find in the meadows or farmlands beyond the whispering wood. Larger than a deer, but built with the same grace, its legs long and slender, its body covered in fur so pale, it seemed almost silver in the lantern's glow. The fur caught the light and held it, shimmering with each movement, each breath, as if the creature had been dipped in moonlight and allowed to dry without shaking off the excess. Its eyes were large and dark and calm, and they reflected the lantern's green-gold glow like pools of still water reflecting stars. Mira had named this creature Shimmer, though she used the name only in her own thoughts, never speaking it aloud. Names, she had learned, were gifts that creatures must give themselves. It was not her place to bestow them. But in her heart, this beast was Shimmer, and Shimmer had been coming to her cottage for 3 years now, ever since the night Mira had found it in the forest, with a thorn deep in its foreleg and fear deep in its eyes. The thorn was long gone, the wound long healed, but Shimmer still came. Not because it needed anything, not because it was hurt or hungry or afraid, but simply because it wanted to. Because the cottage was warm, and the druid was kind, and there was something in the ritual of care, the brushing, the soft words, the gentle touch, that the creature had come to love. "Hello, old friend," Mira said, her voice pitched low and soft, carrying no further than the few feet between them. Come in. The fire is warm." Shimmer stepped through the doorway, ducking its head slightly to clear the frame, and moved with that peculiar grace of wild things to the spot by the hearth that had long ago become its own, a corner where the stones held the fire's heat, and the floor was covered with a thick rug woven from wool that Mira had spun herself, dyed with plants from her garden in shades of green and gold and soft brown. The creature folded its legs beneath itself and settled onto the rug, and Mira could see the small sigh that passed through its body, the gentle release of tension that came with arriving somewhere safe. She let Shimmer rest for a moment, turning her attention to the preparations. The water in the kettle had warmed, not quite to boiling, but hot enough, and she poured some into a wide clay bowl, adding a handful of dried lavender that floated on the surface like tiny purple boats. The scent rose with the steam, filling the cottage with its soft, clean fragrance. And Mira paused to breathe it in, to let it settle into her own body, the way she hoped it would settle into Shimmer's. The steam curled upward in lazy spirals, and she found herself watching it, her breath slowing to match its unhurried rise. In and out, in and out. The rhythm of the steam became the rhythm of her breathing, and she felt her shoulders drop slightly, felt the small tensions of the day begin to dissolve. When she turned back to Shimmer, she carried the bowl of lavender water in one hand and a soft brush in the other. A brush made from the finest horsehair, its bristles worn smooth by years of use, its handle carved from applewood that had been polished by her palm until it gleamed. "Now then," she said, kneeling beside the creature, "let us see how you are." The brushing was a ritual as old as their friendship, and both of them knew its rhythms by heart. Mira began at the creature's neck, drawing the brush through the silver fur in long, slow strokes, following the direction of growth, never pressing too hard, never rushing. Each stroke was paired with a soft exhale, a breath released, a letting go that she could feel echoed in the creature beneath her hands. Shimmer's eyes began to droop. The brush moved down the neck to the shoulder, working through the fur that grew thicker there, loosening the small tangles that had formed, smoothing the coat until it lay flat and gleaming. Mira dipped her fingers in the lavender water and worked them through a patch of fur that seemed drier than the rest. The moisture and fragrance absorbed almost instantly, leaving behind only softness and shine. "There now," she murmured. "That's better, is it not?" Shimmer let out a sound, not quite a sigh, not quite a hum, but something between, and leaned slightly into Mira's touch, pressing its shoulder against her hand like a cat seeking contact. The brush moved on, down the flank, across the belly, along the long, slender legs that had once carried a thorn's wound and now carried only the memory of healing. Mira checked each joint, each hoof, each place where injury might hide, finding nothing amiss, finding only health and wholeness and the simple miracle of a body at peace. Dust motes drifted in the lantern light, suspended in the warm air, floating with the same unhurried grace as the steam from the bowl, as the brush through the fur, as the breath in Mira's chest. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, its voice a gentle accompaniment to the brushing, a rhythm beneath the rhythm, a heartbeat beneath the breath. When the brushing was complete, Mira set the brush aside and simply sat for a moment, her hand resting on Shimmer's flank, feeling the rise and fall of the creature's breathing, feeling the warmth of its body, feeling the deep contentment that radiated from it like heat from the coals. "Good," she said, more to herself than to Shimmer. "Good." She rose and moved to the small shelf beside the hearth where she kept her supplies, the jars and pots and bottles that held the results of her years of learning, of gathering, of careful preparation. She selected a jar of salve, thick and green and fragrant with comfrey and calendula, and returned to Shimmer's side. There was a place on the creature's rear leg, just above the hoof, where the skin had always been a little rough, a little dry, not injured, not infected, just in need of extra care. Mira dipped her fingers in the salve and worked it gently into the skin, feeling the roughness soften beneath her touch, feeling the salve absorb and do its quiet work. Shimmer's eyes had closed now, its breathing slow and deep, its body utterly relaxed upon the woven rug. It was not quite asleep, but it was not quite awake either, suspended in that gentle space between, the space where the body trusts completely, where the mind releases its hold on alertness, where everything is warmth and softness and the certain knowledge that all is well. Mira wiped her hands on a soft cloth and sat back on her heels, watching the creature rest. The lantern light fell upon its silver fur and turned it to rippled silk, to gathered moonlight, to something too beautiful for words. The fire crackled on, the steam continued to rise from the bowl, and the cottage held its breath in a perfect stillness that asked nothing and gave everything. Outside in the deepening dark, another set of footsteps could be heard on the path. Another visitor was coming, and Mira smiled and rose and prepared to welcome them in. The second creature to arrive that evening was larger than Shimmer, and stranger too, though strange was perhaps the wrong word for something that had become so familiar, so beloved, so much a part of Mira's tending nights that its arrival felt less like a surprise and more like the return of an old friend from a journey. It came through the cottage door with the unhurried dignity of something that knew exactly where it belonged, its hooves making soft sounds on the worn wooden floor, its head turning to take in the room, with eyes that gleamed like polished amber in the lantern light. Its body was the color of autumn bark, deep brown touched with gray, and its legs were thick and sturdy, built for long walks through difficult terrain. But it was the antlers that drew the eye, the antlers that always drew the eye. They rose from the creature's head in graceful curves, branching and rebranching like the limbs of an ancient tree, and they were not made of bone or keratin or any material Mira could name. They were something else entirely, something that caught the light and fractured it into soft rainbows, something that hummed with a sound almost too low to hear, a vibration that Mira felt more in her chest than in her ears. The hum was the creature's voice, or the closest thing to a voice that it possessed. When it was content, the hum was low and steady, like a cat's purr or the distant drone of bees. When it was unsettled, the hum grew higher, more erratic, harder to ignore. But tonight, as on most nights, the hum was peaceful, a soft bass note that wove itself into the crackling of the fire and the whisper of the wind outside, becoming part of the cottage's evening music. Mira had no name for this creature, not even a private one. Some beings resisted naming, even in the silence of one's own thoughts, and this was one of them. It was simply itself, the antlered one, the hummer, the creature who came on tending nights and settled by the fire and let Mira work her gentle ministrations upon it. "Welcome," Mira said, and the word carried warmth, carried invitation, carried the accumulated affection of many such evenings spent in each other's company. The creature dipped its head, whether in greeting or simply in acknowledgement, Mira could not say, and made its way to its usual spot on the opposite side of the hearth from Shimmer, who had not stirred at the newcomer's arrival, too deeply relaxed to do more than twitch one ear in recognition. The antlered one did not lie down immediately. It stood for a moment, looking at Mira with those amber eyes, and the hum that emanated from its antlers shifted slightly, becoming a question, an inquiry, a gentle request. Mira understood. "Yes," she said, "the steam, I have it ready." She turned to the corner of the cottage where her workbench stood, a sturdy piece of oak furniture that had been her grandmother's and her grandmother's mother's before that, its surface worn smooth by generations of hands, preparing generations of remedies. Upon it now sat a collection of herbs that she had gathered that afternoon from her garden and from the edges of the forest. Pine needles, sharp and green, lavender, purple and fragrant, chamomile, yellow as summer sunshine, and beneath them all, the rich dark earth scent of valerian root, freshly dug and washed clean. She added each herb to a large ceramic bowl, then poured hot water from the kettle over them, and the steam that rose was thick and fragrant, carrying the essence of each plant upward in a swirling cloud that seemed to fill the entire cottage with its perfume. Pine and lavender, chamomile and valerian. the scents layered upon each other, interweaving, creating something that was more than the sum of its parts, something that spoke directly to the body's deep knowledge of what it needed to relax, to release, to rest. The antlered creature moved closer to the bowl, lowering its great head until its muzzle was just above the surface of the water, breathing in the fragrant steam. The hum from its antlers deepened, steadied, became something almost like a song, a simple melody repeated endlessly, soothing beyond measure. Mira settled herself on a low stool beside the creature, close enough to rest her hand on its flank if she wished, and she too breathed in the steam, letting it fill her lungs, letting it work its gentle magic on her own body. Her eyes drifted half-closed. Her shoulders, which had been holding tension she had not even noticed, began to drop. Her breathing slowed to match the creature's, to match the rhythm of the hum, to match the steady pulse of the fire. For a long while, neither of them moved. The steam continued to rise from the bowl, curling and twisting in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost meaningful, though what they meant Mira could not say. The fire crackled on, its voice a gentle counterpoint to the antler hum. Shimmer breathed slowly in its corner, silver fur rising and falling with each long exhale. And outside the night deepened, the stars multiplied, and the forest settled into its own evening quiet. When the steam had thinned and the water had cooled, Mira stirred herself and reached for the salve she had used on Shimmer. The same green paste of comfrey and calendula, good for rough skin and dry patches, and the small irritations that even the most magical of creatures could acquire in their wanderings. The antlered one had a place behind its left ear where the fur thinned and the skin sometimes grew dry, and Mira worked the salve into this spot with gentle fingers, feeling the creature lean into her touch, feeling the hum shift to something deeper, something more contented, something that was almost a thank you expressed in vibration rather than words. "There," she murmured. "Is that better?" The hum answered her, low and warm and satisfied. She moved her hands to the antlers themselves, carefully, always carefully, for they were sensitive in ways she did not fully understand, and ran her fingers along the smooth curves, checking for cracks or chips or any sign of damage. She found none. The antlers were perfect, as they always were, their surface cool and faintly humming beneath her fingertips, their branches catching the firelight and scattering it across the cottage walls in patterns of soft color. The creature's eyes had closed now, its breathing deepened, its body swaying slightly with each exhale, as if it were being rocked by some invisible tide. Mira withdrew her hands and simply sat, watching, listening to the hum that filled the room like a lullaby, letting it wash over her and through her and settle into her bones. This was what she loved most about tending nights. Not the work itself, though the work was satisfying. Not the feeling of being needed, though that feeling was warm and good. But these moments of shared stillness, of being present with another creature in a space where nothing was demanded, where nothing was expected, where the only purpose was to be together, to breathe together, to rest together. The hum went on, endless and soothing, and Mira let her own eyes close, let her own body sway slightly with the rhythm, let herself sink into the peace of the moment. She did not know how long she sat there. Time moved differently on tending nights, stretching and compressing according to its own mysterious logic, and she had long ago stopped trying to track it. When she finally opened her eyes, the fire had burned lower, the steam from the bowl had faded to nothing, and both creatures, Shimmer and the antlered one, were deeply asleep, their bodies relaxed, their breathing synchronized, their presence filling the cottage with a warmth that had nothing to do with flame, and everything to do with trust. Mira rose quietly, careful not to disturb them, and moved to the window to look out at the night. The lantern moss still glowed beside the door, casting its soft light across the garden path, and in that light she could see movement, more visitors, making their way through the darkness, drawn by the glow, by the scent, by the knowledge that here they would find what they sought. She smiled and began to prepare once more, her movements slow and sure, her heart full of the quiet joy that came from doing work that mattered, from caring for creatures who could not speak their gratitude, but whose every gesture, every lean, every soft sound spoke it for them. The night was young yet, and there was more tending to be done. The grove lay behind the cottage, through a gate in the garden wall that was more suggestion than barrier, a few mossy stones piled low, a wooden arch softened by climbing vines, an opening that seemed less like a transition between spaces and more like an invitation to keep walking, to follow the path wherever it might lead. Mira passed through the gate and into the grove, her footsteps nearly silent on the thick carpet of fallen leaves and soft moss that covered the ground. The air here was cooler than in the cottage, touched with the crisp edge of night. But it was not cold, not unpleasant, merely different, merely the particular temperature of a forest in the gentle hours after sunset. The lantern moss glowed in the lantern she carried, casting its green-gold light in a soft circle around her, illuminating the path and the trees that lined it, their trunks silvered with lichen, their branches bare or nearly so, reaching toward the stars like arms raised in prayer. This was the sleeping grove, and it was full of sleepers. They were everywhere. Once she knew how to look for them, nestled in hollows between roots, perched on low branches, curled in the soft beds of moss and leaves that seemed to form naturally in the places where the ground dipped and the undergrowth grew thick. They were creatures of feather and warmth, birds unlike any you might see in the world beyond the whispering wood, their plumage soft and dense and touched with colors that seemed to glow in the lantern light, deep reds and sunset oranges, pale golds, and the soft grey blue of early morning. These creatures did not fly, or rather they could fly but chose not to, preferring to walk the forest floor on sturdy legs and to sleep in the warm communal nests they built together in the grove. And the remarkable thing about them, the thing that never failed to fill Mira with quiet wonder, was the warmth they radiated. Not just the ordinary warmth of a living body, but something more, a gentle heat that seemed to come from somewhere deep within them, that spread outward through their feathers and into the air around them, turning even the coolest nights into something bearable, something almost cozy. Mira had discovered them years ago, on a winter night when she had been walking the grove, and had stumbled upon what she thought at first was a pile of autumn leaves, only to find it alive and warm and full of bright eyes that watched her without fear. She had returned the next night, and the next, bringing with her offerings of seed and grain, and over time the creatures had come to know her, to trust her, to welcome her into their nests as easily as they welcomed their own. She moved through the grove now with the ease of long familiarity, stopping at each nest to check on its occupants, to count the sleepers, to make sure all was well. The creatures stirred as she approached, lifting their heads to look at her, their eyes reflecting the lantern light like scattered stars, but they did not startle, did not flee. They knew her, they trusted her, and they settled back into their warmth as soon as she had passed, returning to the slow breathing of their communal sleep. At the largest nest, a great bowl of woven twigs and soft moss at the base of an ancient oak, she paused and knelt, setting the lantern aside and letting her hands rest upon her knees. The ground beneath her was soft, cushioned by layers of fallen leaves and the thick moss that grew here in abundance, and she shifted until she found a comfortable position, her weight supported, her body at ease. She closed her eyes. The sounds of the grove surrounded her, the soft rustle of feathers as creatures adjusted their positions, the distant call of an owl somewhere in the deeper forest, the whisper of wind through the bare branches overhead. And beneath these sounds, woven through them like a thread through cloth, was the soft collective breathing of the sleepers. Many breaths, many bodies, but all of them moving in a rhythm that was almost synchronized, as if the creatures dreamed together, breathed together, rested as a single organism spread across the grove. Mira let her own breathing slow to match theirs. In and out, in and out. The rhythm was gentle, unhurried, deep. It asked nothing of her except that she follow it, that she let it carry her, that she surrender to the simple act of breathing in a place where breathing was enough. The warmth of the nearest creatures reached her even from where she knelt. A gentle radiance that touched her face, her hands, her arms. It was like sitting before a fire, but softer, more diffuse, more alive. She could feel it seeping into her skin, into her muscles, into the places where tension liked to hide. And everywhere it touched, she felt herself relaxing, releasing, letting go. One of the creatures rose from the nest and waddled toward her. A large one, its feathers the deep red of autumn maple leaves, its eyes bright and curious. It stopped a few inches from her knee and looked up at her, tilting its head in that way that birds have, as if considering something, as if weighing an important question. Then it settled itself against her leg, tucking its feet beneath its body, fluffing its feathers, and closing its eyes. Mira smiled and rested her hand gently upon its back, feeling the warmth that radiated from it, feeling the softness of its feathers beneath her palm. The creature let out a small sound, not quite a chirp, not quite a coo, but something between, and seemed to sink more deeply into its rest, as if her touch had given it permission to let go completely, to trust completely, to sleep without reservation. She stayed like that for a long while, her hand on the creature's back, her breathing matched to the rhythm of the grove, her body absorbing the warmth that surrounded her. The lantern glowed beside her, its moss light steady and unchanging. The stars wheeled slowly overhead, visible through gaps in the bare branches, and the forest held its breath, holding her too, cradling her in its vast and patient embrace. When she finally stirred, it was with great reluctance, as if waking from a dream she did not wish to leave. But there was more to be done, more creatures to check on, more small kindnesses to offer before the night was through. She lifted her hand from the sleeping creature and rose carefully to her feet, taking up the lantern, moving on through the grove. She checked each nest in turn, counting heads, noting any who seemed restless or unwell, adding soft handfuls of dried grasses to the nests that had grown thin, adjusting the placement of fallen branches that provided shelter from the wind. The creatures watched her work with sleepy eyes, and some of them reached up to touch her hands with their beaks as she passed, gentle contacts that were their way of saying thank you, their way of acknowledging the care she gave. At the last nest, the smallest one, tucked into a hollow between the roots of a great beech tree, she found a creature that was new to the grove, a young one, its feathers still downy and soft, its eyes wide with the particular brightness of the very young. It was alone in its nest, though it would not be alone for long. She could see other creatures nearby, watching over it, ready to join it once she had gone. She knelt beside the nest and reached out, letting the young creature sniff her fingers, letting it learn her scent. It chirped softly, a questioning sound, and and she chirped back, an imitation that made its eyes widen and its feathers fluff. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "Welcome to the grove. You are safe here. You are home." She did not stay long. The young needed their rest, and too much attention could be as disruptive as too little. But she stayed long enough to smooth the edges of the nest, to add a handful of soft moss to its lining, to whisper a few more words of welcome and reassurance. Then she rose and made her way back through the grove, toward the gate in the garden wall, toward the cottage where the fire still burned and the creatures still slept, and the work of tending went on, endless and gentle and full of love. The cottage welcomed her back with warmth and the soft sounds of sleeping creatures. Shimmer's slow breathing from one corner, the antlered one's deep hum from the other, the crackle of the fire that had burned low but still cast its gentle glow across the room. Mira set the lantern on its hook beside the door and moved to tend the hearth, adding a few small logs to the coals, watching the flames rise and catch and settle into their steady, patient dance. She was turning toward the workbench when she heard it. A heavy tread on the path outside, slow and deliberate, each footstep landing with a weight that seemed to make the very ground tremble slightly. She knew that tread. She knew the creature it belonged to. The door, which she always left slightly ajar on tending nights, an invitation to any who wished to enter, swung wider, and into the cottage came a being that seemed almost too large for the space, too solid, too present. Its body was the color of granite, its hide thick and rough, covered not in fur or feathers, but in what looked like stone. Plates of it, overlapping like the scales of a great fish, each one marked with the lines and whorls of long ages of weathering. But it was not made of stone, not truly. Mira had learned that long ago. On the first night this creature had appeared at her door, wounded and wary. Beneath the stony hide was flesh, warm and living, and within that flesh beat a heart. Slowly, so slowly that Mira could count the seconds between beats, but beating nonetheless, steady and strong and full of the quiet endurance that comes from having lived a very long time. She called this creature, in her own thoughts, the Ancient, though she knew it was not truly ancient, only old, only patient, only possessed of a kind of timelessness that made all other creatures seem fleeting by comparison. "Hello, dear one," she said, and her voice carried the particular tenderness she reserved for this visitor, this being who came so rarely, who trusted her so completely, who asked so little and gave so much simply by existing. The Ancient moved to the center of the room and settled onto the floor with a sound like distant thunder, its great body folding in on itself until it had arranged itself into something almost compact, almost cozy, its stony plates shifting and adjusting until it seemed as comfortable as a creature of such mass could be. Mira approached and laid her hand upon its flank, feeling the roughness of the stone-like hide beneath her palm, feeling too the warmth that radiated from within. Not the bright warmth of the feathered creatures in the grove, but something deeper, something older, like the heat that comes from the earth itself in places where hot springs bubble up from the depths. "You honor me with your visit," she said, and she meant it. The Ancient could go months without appearing, years sometimes, but when it came for a reason, not out of need usually, but out of something harder to name. Companionship, perhaps, connection, the simple desire to be tended to be seen, to be cared for by hands that knew how. She went to her workbench and gathered what she would need, a bowl of sweet roots that she had prepared that morning, knowing somehow that tonight would be the night the Ancient returned, a pot of thick salve made from beeswax and herbs, good for keeping the stony hide from cracking, a cloth for wiping and smoothing, a cup of honeyed tea for herself, because this tending would take time and she wished to be comfortable. She returned to the ancient's side and settled herself on the floor beside it, tucking her legs beneath her, arranging her tools within easy reach. The creature watched her with eyes that were the color of amber touched with gold, eyes that held depths she could not fathom, knowledge she could not guess, a patience that seemed to stretch back beyond memory. The sweet roots went first. She held them up to the creature's great muzzle, and it took them gently, one by one, its breath warm against her hand as it chewed slowly, thoroughly, savoring each bite. The roots were a favorite. She had learned that early in their acquaintance, and the pleasure the creature took in them was evident in the way its eyes half closed, the way its breathing deepened, the way its whole body seemed to relax into the simple joy of eating something good. When the roots were gone, Mira reached for the salve and began the long work of tending the stony hide. She worked in sections, starting at the creature's shoulder and moving slowly down its flank, applying the salve to the seams between the plates, working it into the places where the hide had grown rough or dry, smoothing it with her cloth until each section gleamed in the firelight. The work was repetitive, meditative, and she let herself sink into its rhythm. Dip, apply, smooth, move on. Her hands performing the movements without conscious thought, her mind drifting in the pleasant haze of useful work well done. The fire crackled. The salve smelled of beeswax and lavender. The ancient breathed slowly beside her, its eyes fully closed now, its massive body utterly relaxed. Time passed. How much, she could not say. The fire burned lower. The lantern moss glowed on, steady and unchanging. Shimmer stirred once in the corner, lifting its silver head to look around before settling back into sleep. The antlered one's hum had faded to the faintest whisper, barely audible, more vibration than sound. When the salve work was complete, Mira set aside her tools and simply sat, her back resting against the ancient's flank, feeling its warmth seep into her, feeling the slow rhythm of its heart beneath the stony hide. It was like leaning against a sun-warmed boulder, like resting beside a fire that gave heat without consuming anything, like being held by something vast and solid and utterly safe. She reached for her cup of honeyed tea, which had cooled but was still warm enough to be pleasant, and sipped it slowly, letting the sweetness spread across her tongue. The honey was from her own hives, gathered in autumn when the bees had finished their work for the year, and it tasted of wildflowers and sunshine and all the patient labor that had gone into its making. The ancient let out a sound, not quite a sigh, not quite a groan, but something between, and shifted slightly, adjusting its weight, settling more deeply into its rest. Mira felt the movement through her whole body, a gentle rocking that seemed to echo the creature's contentment, its satisfaction, its simple pleasure in being here, being tended, being warm and safe and not alone. There now, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. There now. All is well. And it was. In that moment, in that cottage, with the fire burning low and the creatures sleeping and the night stretching on outside, all was very much well indeed. The hour had grown late, though Mira could not have said how late exactly. Time moved by its own rules on tending nights, and she had long ago stopped trying to measure it by the standards of the ordinary world. The fire had burned down to its lowest ebb, a bed of embers that glowed red and orange and gold, putting out a gentle heat that asked nothing in return. The lantern moss still shone beside the door, but its light seemed softer now, dimmer, as if it too were settling towards sleep. She rose from her place against the ancient's flank moving slowly and carefully so as not to disturb the creature's rest. It did not stir. Its breathing continued in its slow, steady rhythm, each exhale lasting seconds, each inhale taking its patient time. The stony hide gleamed in the ember light, still showing the sheen of the salve she had applied, still radiating its deep, ancient warmth. Mira began her rounds. This was the final ritual of every tending night, the last movement in a dance she had performed countless times before. The checking, the adjusting, the small acts of care that would see each creature safely through the hours until dawn. She moved through the cottage with the ease of long practice, her footsteps nearly silent, her hands sure and gentle. First, the lanterns. The one beside the door needed no tending. The moss kept its own light, steady and patient. But there were smaller lanterns throughout the cottage, simple clay dishes filled with oil and floating wicks, and these she checked one by one, trimming the wicks where they had burned low, adding oil where the levels had dropped, adjusting the flames until they burned evenly, casting their soft, steady light across the room. Approach the lantern, lift it gently, trim the wick, add oil if needed, set it back in its place. Pause, breathe. She moved from lantern to lantern, and with each one, she let out a slow breath, releasing whatever tension had accumulated, letting herself sink deeper into the peace of the evening. Next, the blankets. Shimmer had shifted in its sleep, and the soft cloth that covered it had slipped to one side. Mira bent and smoothed it back into place, tucking the edges gently around the silver fur, making sure the creature was wrapped in warmth. Shimmer's eyes flickered open for a moment, reflecting the ember light, and then closed again, its breath deepening, its body relaxing further into the nest of wool and warmth. Approach the creature, see what is needed, adjust the blanket, smooth it gently, whisper a word of comfort, step back, pause, breathe. The antlered one did not need a blanket. Its thick fur was warmth enough, but it needed a word, a touch, a small acknowledgement of its presence. Mira knelt beside it and laid her hand upon its flank, feeling the slow rise and fall of its breathing, feeling the faint vibration of the antler hum that never quite ceased, even in sleep. Rest well, she whispered. You are safe here. You are home. The creature did not wake, but something in its breathing shifted, deepened, as if her words had reached it in its dreams and brought it comfort. She rose and moved on. The ancient was next, though it needed nothing, asked for nothing, simply lay in its place like a great living boulder, radiating warmth and patience. Mira circled it slowly, checking each section of its stony hide, making sure the salve had done its work, making sure no cracks or rough patches had been missed. She found nothing amiss, only the smooth gleam of well-tended hide, only the slow pulse of a heart that beat with the patience of mountains. She laid her hand upon its great head, feeling the warmth beneath her palm, feeling the weight of all the years this creature had lived, all the seasons it had seen, all the quiet wisdom it had accumulated. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me care for you. The ancient's amber eyes opened, just for a moment, and something passed between them. Not words, for words were not needed, but something deeper, something older, something that spoke of trust and gratitude and the simple, profound connection between one living thing and another. Then the eyes closed again, and the creature sank back into its rest, and Mira moved on. The final check was of the cottage itself, the door, the windows, the fire. She went to the door and looked out at the night. The garden path lit by the lantern moss, the gate to the grove standing open but welcoming, the forest beyond dark and peaceful and full of sleeping things. All was as it should be. All was well. She closed the door gently, leaving it unlatched. It was always unlatched on tending nights, and turned to the fire. The embers needed no tending, no adjustment. They would burn through the night and into the dawn, keeping the cottage warm, keeping the creatures comfortable, keeping the gentle sanctuary that Mira had made alive and breathing and whole. She added nothing to the fire. She only watched it for a moment, letting its warmth touch her face, letting its soft red glow fill her eyes. Then she let out a long, slow breath, the last breath of the night's work, the breath that said, "It is done. It is complete. There is nothing more to be done until morning." The cottage settled around her, full of sleeping creatures, full of warmth, full of the accumulated care of 1,000 tending nights that had come before, and the 1,000 more that would come after. The lanterns glowed softly, the embers pulsed, the ancient breathed, the antlered one hummed, Shimmer dreamed its silver dreams, and Mira made her way to her own chair by the fire. Not the grand chair of some fine house, just a simple wooden chair with a seat worn smooth by years of sitting, a back that curved just right to support her spine, armrests rubbed to a soft polish by hands that had rested there night after night after night. She sat, and she let herself settle into the chair's embrace, feeling its familiar shape hold her, support her, welcome her as it had welcomed her so many times before. Her eyes drifted closed, her breathing slowed. The cottage breathed around her, in and out, in and out, the rhythm of many sleepers synchronized into a single slow pulse. The words moved through her mind like leaves drifting on a gentle current, each one softer than the last, each one carrying her further from waking, closer to the place where sleep waited to receive her. The fire glowed on, steady and patient. The creatures slept on, warm and safe. And Mira rested, surrounded by the beings she had cared for, held by the sanctuary she had made, cradled by the night that asked nothing of her now, except that she let go, let rest, let the gentle darkness carry her wherever it wished to go. The last lantern has been checked, the blankets have been smoothed, and the beasts are sleeping in their quiet, trusting way. Here in the tavern, our fire does the same, steady, warm, and unhurried. The logs have settled into their ember beds. The night has deepened to its darkest hour, and the only sounds now are the soft crackle of the coals and the gentle breathing of those who have found their rest. There is nothing left to do now but rest. Mira sleeps in her chair by the fire, surrounded by the creatures she has tended. The ancient breathes its slow, stone-deep breaths. The antlered one hums its soft, continuous song. Shimmer gleams silver in the ember light. And somewhere in the grove beyond the garden gate, the feathered ones are warm in their nests, dreaming their warm and feathered dreams. The sanctuary holds them all, as it has always held them, as it will always hold them, for as long as the forest stands, and the druid tends, and there are creatures in need of gentle hands, and soft words, and the simple, profound gift of being cared for. Let the story grow as soft as embers now. Let it fade into the warmth, into the quiet, into the place where stories go when their telling is done. You do not need to hold on to anything. You do not need to remember the words. Only let the feeling stay with you. The feeling of being tended to, of being safe, of being held in a place where all is well and nothing is demanded except rest. The fire glows on, steady and patient. The night holds its breath, and all the creatures in the cottage and in the grove and in this very room settle deeper into their dreams, knowing that when morning comes, they will be cared for again and again and again, as they have always been cared for, as they will always be cared for. in the sanctuary at the forest's edge. Sleep well, dear traveler. The druid keeps her watch. The creatures rest in peace, and the warmth of fire, of care, of belonging, will be here when you wake. Good night.